Today, on the agenda, we had commission business from 1 to 2, and now we have from 2 to 4. We're getting a quarterly update from Sound Transit and the City of Seattle on the Ballard Link Extension Light Rail and West Seattle Link Extension Light Rail work.
Don't forget Graham Street.
And Graham Street, the or what should we call it? The
Exciting project.
And I think I said the briefings are by Sound Transit and by the city's Office of the Waterfront, Civic Projects, and Sound Transit. Ray is going to lead our discussions after the presentations, and I think we decided to break it into like separate, first Sound Transit, then city, and then we'll do Q&A and discussion after that. And then this is just one of a series of quarterly updates that we try to do so that we can keep up to date on things. So that as we do station reviews, we are in the know and don't have to roll it all out at the beginning of every project review. It saves us that. So let's do introductions first in the room of commissioners. Do you want to start?
Sure. Hey everyone, Katie Lau. I'm the Open Design Commissioner and I'm a recent member.
Hi, I'm Kate Clark. I'm the Art Commissioner.
I'm Ray Gastel, the Planning Commissioner.
Zubin Rao, Architecture Commissioner.
I'm Kevin O'Neill, the Transportation Planning Commissioner.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Alipio and I'm the Get Engaged Commissioner.
Shireen Masudi, At-Large Commissioner, Vice Chair.
Phoebe Bogert, Landscape Architect Commissioner and Chair.
Ben Gist, Architect Commissioner. Brian Markham, Engineering Commissioner.
Hi everyone, Brian Masick, Project Manager for Sound Transit for the Grand Route and Boeing District.
I'm Gavin Schaefer, Design Director on Ballard Link Extension for Stations from Sound Transit.
I'm Jason Hampton. I'm the Commercial Director for the West Seattle Link Extension for Sound Transit.
I'm Sandra Fan from the Office of Planning and Development. I worked on the Enterprise Initiative recently.
And Justin Clark, I'm the third-party agreements lead for West Seattle and Bound.
Then let's just go around the room because I know there's a mixture of folks. Introduce yourself.
Hi there, Ryan Packer with Urbanist.
Lindsay King, STP.
Fred Planning Manager for the city's SD program.
Sarah Maxana, Sound Transit Program Director for the city.
Molly Spatalnik, Station Planning and Urban Design Lead for Ballard.
And I'm CJ Olda, the City of Seattle, the City Director for City Buses. Yes. That's been funding fuel stations, project manager for the cities.
Awesome. Share screen, make sure we're awesome. Well, thanks for having us as always. I just want to thank Valerie and the city team for patience with us as you know, I think we were trying to come in April and then again in May. But we had to work around the board making some really important decisions on the entire enterprise initiative. So we appreciate the patience until really big decisions that were made at the board last week. So I think now that we have some really important updates to share with y'all based on the board decisions, we're happy to come talk about findings from the enterprise initiative and then how that's affected the 3 Seattle projects here. So just giving you a lay of the land of our presentation today. Andrew here will give us an update on the enterprise initiative and the board action from last week. And we'll kick it over to Jason. He'll give some updates on the West Seattle Link extension, along with some more detailed discussion on some of the design refinements that have really been a part of a lot of those decisions at the board level. Yeah, and we'll talk about Valley Link extension, and then Ryan will finish us off with Graham Street. And then we'll finish up with just a slide talking about our next touch points with the SDC on all 3 projects. So that's what you need here to get us started.
Interesting. So I'll try to keep this semi-brief because I know you want to get to the projects. But just to start off, to give you an orientation to the Enterprise Initiative, I think you've probably heard from my colleague Alex Krieg, probably in a previous briefing. But just as background, like many agencies across the country, Sound Transit has been facing rapidly escalating costs in nearly every area of our work. So the Enterprise Initiative was launched about a year ago in May of 2025. and was our comprehensive effort aimed at delivering the maximum benefits of ST3 within available financial resources. Recognizing that this is not the first time the agency has faced affordability challenges, we took a holistic, comprehensive approach, or what we refer to as the enterprise level approach, given the size of the ST3 program and also our rapidly expanding operational footprint, given all the openings we've had in the last few years. We looked at all parts of the agency's work, including policy and planning, our capital program, how we operate the system and maintain the system, and of course, how we finance the delivery of both capital projects and transit operations. We reached our major milestone last week on May 28th. The Sound Transit Board updated the ST3 system plan, helping to close the funding gap and set a sustainable trajectory for delivering the objectives of the ST3 plan. Next slide, please. So just wanted to briefly touch on engagement. I won't go through all this, but wanted to, so if you have been following the enterprise initiative, in March timeframe, we did roll out at a board retreat several approaches for potentially updating the ST3 plan and affordability and the affordable program. And after that, we launched an online survey that was conducted from March 30th to May 1st in 7 languages and asked for on their priorities and what they wanted the board members to consider as they updated the ST3 plan. We also held, we didn't host actually, Transportation Choices Coalition hosted a number of town halls and invited board members to speak at all of the town halls as well as Sound Transit staff. And then board members also held other community events and stakeholder events were held around where we were invited to speak and hear people's thoughts about the enterprise initiative. Specific to City of Seattle, some of you may be aware of that more specific community event held in West Seattle, as well as the Ballard, hosted by board members, and then also at the Graham Station, where a couple of our board members were able to attend and speak about the enterprise initiative and to hear from community members. Slide, please. And what we heard, I mean, this is really boiled down. There was an engagement summary report, and at our executive committee meeting on May 7th, some of the preliminary findings were shared publicly. But what we heard loud and clear was support for local projects and priorities, including the ones in the City of Seattle, ongoing support for the full ST3 program, and to use every tool possible to be able to ultimately deliver the full ST3 plan. And of course, we also heard desire for meaningful, timely engagement and easy access to information. Next slide, please. So with that, the board of directors did take in a lot of information, and we heard clear direction from them and prioritization of advancing the full ST3 program while prioritizing building the projects that are ready, and also advocate advancing planning and projects further down the pipeline so that the agency can maximize progress within available resources and continue to make updates as we assess affordability in future years. The board approved an affordable ST3 capital program with projects falling into the 3 categories that are listed here. Those that are affordable within available resources, projects with unfunded construction phases or funded through planning and design, and deferred projects, with the direction to continue to reassess, seek additional funding, and report back to the board on a regular basis on the status of the projects, cost savings efforts, and also our financial picture. Next slide, please. So this one is probably of particular interest to all of you because the projects in Seattle all are listed on this page. But I want to, these are the projects that are affordable within available resources. There are 2 columns represented here. The column to the left are the projects that are fully funded all the way through construction at this time, based on the information we have in hand. And these include the spine, completion of the spine from to Everett into Tacoma, as well as in Seattle, the West Seattle Link Extension project with no Avalon station. The Ballard Link Extension, an initial segment, is what we understand at this time is that the project is affordable to the Seattle Center station. And then also the T-line extension in Tacoma and the South Brooklyn to Issaquah line, those are on this list with dates pushed further out when they would be affordable. And then also some OMF facilities, and the newest on this list, because of a lot of the feedback that they heard from the community and the city's strong support for the station. This one moved from the partially funded to the fully funded list through an amendment at the May 28th board meeting. And the partially funded projects or projects funded through planning and design include the full Ballard Link extension all the way to Market Street. This is funded through planning and environmental and through final design. So again, the idea is to keep the project moving forward as we continue to keep seeking cost savings and other funding opportunities, as well as the Boeing Access Road Station through final design. This is included in this partially funded list and many parts of the Sounder program as well. Next slide, please. So this is a list of projects with construction or full delivery currently unfunded. And you'll see that a lot of the items on this list are repeats of the projects that were on the previous list. These represent the projects the board views as the high priority projects to figure out how to fully fund. So specifically, of course, for all of you, the Ballard Link Extension, Seattle Center to Market Street was the topic of a lot of conversation in the boardroom. It's clear that there's strong support by all board members to keep that project moving forward and to ultimately be able to deliver it. Boeing Access Road Station and also completion of the subway program also. And then finally, there is a list of deferred projects. Many of these projects were previously deferred in the S3 realignment process that took place in 2021. Most of them are parking investments, as well as some corridor improvements and parts of the South Transit program that have been assessed previously or possibly are deemed not as necessary since the SC3 program or plan passed in 2016. So, however, if additional funding from other parties become available for these projects, the board may allocate agency resources to advance delivery of some of these projects. So that's the end of my portion of the presentation.
Yeah, we'll pass it over to Jason. Yes, yeah.
Okay, and Gavin reminded me how many slides I have and asked me to keep everybody awake. So they're here for him. So we're just going to jump to the next slide here. We're going to try to keep things going. So many of you have seen this slide before, but the West Seattle Link Extension project, that's 4.1 miles of light rail service connecting SOTA to West Seattle's Alaska Junction neighborhood. Eventually, people traveling on the system will be able to go from Alaska Junction all the way up to Linwood and further north. But until Ballard opens, we would have a transfer at SOTA to connect with the regional light rail system. And during that time, the buses would continue running from West Seattle to downtown. So I think that's a really important consideration. The project would include, we say here, up to 4 stations. I think, Sandra mentioned that the board decision last Thursday would be to consolidate the stations in West Seattle and not have an Avalon station. So that's why we say up to 4. It reduces travel time from Alaska Junction to Westlake by 50%. So a trip that in 2042 would take 30 minutes by bus would take 16 minutes by light rail. The transit service frequency and reliability would be improved with the project. And it provides a travel alternative should there be a closure for repairs or other things for the West Seattle or Spokane Street Bridge. And then I think a really important point here is even with the changes to the project that we're looking at, we would still facilitate future expansion to the south. So we're designing this in a way that we could continue from Alaska Junction down to Buren, which we know is a priority for the community. So some of the key milestones is we published a draft EIS in January 28th, 2022. And that was a joint EIS with the Ballard project. And at the time, we received over 5,000 public comments from agency partners, from the tribes and community members. The West Seattle project moved forward and into an FEIS, which was published in September of 2024, followed by a ST board decision on the project to be built in October of that year. Near that time, we also updated our cost estimates, and that's when we first recognized that there was an affordability challenge for the West Seattle project. And thereafter, we recognized that there was challenges across the entire agency CDD, like the capital delivery portfolio, as well as other business units. So that's when the enterprise initiative really kind of kicked off there. We did receive our federal record of decision from our partner at the Federal Transit Administration in April of 2025. That was a really big milestone, still is a really big milestone for the project. And since then, we've continued to advance our design work to identify cost savings and validate the PE design, which you all reviewed in 2024. Upcoming activities that are worth noting is we're starting to advertise construction management consultant contracts. So these are the folks that will come in and help us manage our contractors once we hit construction. Our first one went out for advertising on Monday of this week. So that's a big milestone again. And then some of our other contracts, specifically the SOTO station GCCM, and then the Duwamish, which is not on here, the elevated guideway, which is a heavy civil GCCM. We're planning to advertise those this summer as well. You're going to see a number of things hit the market, and we'll start to bring those contractors on and those CMC supports later this year and into next year. They're all still awake, so we're good. So next slide, please. So the design refinements, and how many of you were at or saw the presentation that we gave in Delridge on April 1st?
I don't think anyone.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about the engagement we've done, but we shared a similar presentation to this at that forum. And what we're describing here are, we looked at a broad range of cost saving measures. Some of them were bad ideas and some of them were good ideas. We moved forward with the good ideas. And then we had to assess whether or not those were something that could work, right? We wanted to, stay within the rails of the EIS and the record of decision. We wanted to continue to provide really great transit connections for the people of West Seattle into the regional system. And so we didn't want to just throw away something good. We wanted to find good solutions that fit within the affordable project. So some of the ideas that are on here were good ideas, and we looked at a lot of these. We were able to validate many of these. So I'm going to go through kind of a east to west, and we're going to talk about some of these. I won't read every call out on this slide because then Gavin, his idea will come true, but you're going to see a lot of it as we go. So, but before we do, and I know that we talked about the no Avalon alternative. So when we looked at the Avalon station in West Seattle, it had a unique alignment between Delridge and Alaska Junction, a lot of surface construction, a lot of property impacts from that station. And while it's a really important station and provided service to that neighborhood and good bus connections, it was one of the lower ridership stations. And so it was a consideration in the EIS that it might not happen. But as we looked at cost savings, it had some pretty big direct cost savings from not building that. And you can see the gray line there where the FEIS alignment was, or the record of decision alignment. And then the blue line, which is mostly tunnel from that bracket at the top to the west. And by not building that, we reduce the number of impacts, but we also, it's key, we unlock tremendous additional cost saving opportunities. I'll describe some of those as we go through it, but if it gets us, it moves the dial big time. So we'll start in SOTO and the Duwamish areas. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the SOTO station, and if you all remember the SOTO station from the PE reviews, there's a lot happening at this station. So kind of to the north is up and to the right. You can see the USPS carrier annex garage there at the top left. So one of the key parts of this station is it's going to be one of the more well-transferred stations. So it's a key transfer point between the 1 line and the 3 line. It's the last transfer spot to the south for people between the 1 and the 3 line. And so it's really important that we have good connections from one platform to the next and then beyond. And we did that in the previous design by having a lot of elevated structure, a lot of escalators, elevators, and stairs. And as we brought our designer on board, which is our EDS designer, engineering design services, Jacobs Engineering, they really looked at this closely, and they looked at a solution where they concentrated the access and the connections between the platforms at the center. So bringing people kind of naturally where they want to travel, have sufficient number of escalators and elevators and stairs to get people up and over. And they've come up with a configuration like this. And you don't see it side by side with the previous configuration, but there's a lot less elevated structure. There's a lot less need for elevators and escalators because they're more consolidated. And not only does that save you money above ground, but the soils in this area, I know Brian's talked about this before, they're really bad. You know, some of the worst in the city. It's built tide flats. And so anything you see up above ground that doesn't need to be built is money we're not putting in the ground. And so that's money that can go into improving station access and improvements. So that's a big change there. We still maintain really great connection to 6th Avenue for the buses and people accessing the station, and maintain some transit-oriented development potential there. So another refinement that the design team looked at is they looked at the Cable State Bridge. And the Cable State Bridge is a long span bridge over the West Duwamish Channel. It's a navigation channel, so it requires a height of 140 feet, matching the West Seattle High Bridge. And in the previous design, they had a kind of 2 rows of cables, and the trains went in between those rows of cables, or the stays. With this, they simplified the design. They built the bridges on the or the decks on the outside of a single cable stay configuration. They've simplified the towers, and so you still have that same iconic look, but it's simpler to build, it's more efficient to build, and it saves money. And again, the foundations in this area are massive. And so anything we can do to add efficiency there, we're saving a lot of money underground. So now moving out to Delridge, and this is where we see some of the bigger cost savings. So this alignment here, and I'm going to spend a bit of time on this because I know we've talked a lot about the transition from the Delridge station, which is at the top right here, north is up. We call it some kind of key landmarks in the West Seattle area, including Nucor, Mode Music, Ounces, and the West Seattle Health Club. So in the FEIS alignment, one of the important parts of the station location and why the alignment was shown where that gray line is because we needed 2 things. We needed really great transit integration between the buses and the light rail station. 90% of the people that access this station will arrive by bus, many of them from communities of the South and the Peninsula. These are our racial equity toolkit communities. And so enhancing access for those communities was our priority. As we did that in the FEIS alignment, we saw, or the DEIS alignment, we saw the station that followed that blue line, but continued west of Andover, or Avalon Way, sorry. We impacted a social service provider called Transitional Resources. And for that reason, we needed to move south to the gray line so we could have an elevated guideway and not displace those really important social resources. But now that we've looked at an alignment with no Avalon station, we can look at the tunnel portal, which in the EIS was further to the west, near the West Seattle Bridge connection to Fauntleroy, and bringing the design team on and looking at it more closely. They've identified a better location for it, which is at the storage site just to the east of Avalon Way. That's a property that would have already been needed for the project, but it's a more efficient portal site. It's a steep slope, which is a good thing when you're trying to drill into a hillside. And by moving it to the east side of Avalon Way, we no longer have that elevated guideway on the west side. So then we can look at moving the station or the alignment back to the south, or sorry, up to the north. I'm confusing myself there, where the blue line is. And by doing that, we do 2 key things. One, we avoid displacing the West Seattle Health Club, which we heard a lot about in the public. There's a lot of members there. It's a really important facility. We also avoid crossing Longfellow Creek, where it's in an open channel. And instead, we're crossing north of Andover, where the pipe carries Longfellow Creek. So these are the types of things that I described when we eliminate the Avalon station, we unlock other potential. So these are our big reduction in impacts there. So this looks at the Delridge station, and I think, you know, as a preview, we'll be back looking at some of the PE changes with the subcommittees. later this year or just in a few months, I believe. And we're going to look at this area specifically. So the Delridge station largely remains the same, but there's a few key considerations. One is you can see that instead of being a center platform station, we're now showing side platforms. And the reason for that is one of the other elements of cost savings is to go to a precast segmental. So that's where you bring in all of the segments for the elevated guideway. And in order to do that, you build these offsite and you truck them in and you put them up. But you need a certain economy of scale to do that to make it worth it. And so by continuing the guideway straight through the station, which you can do at the side platform, you're able to achieve those cost savings. One of the other things that they're looking at is bringing the entire site up. I think when we've seen this before, we've seen that the lower part near Newport is about 25 feet lower than the Delridge Way level. So if we build that up, we then reduce the vertical elements that we need. So we still have the same number of elevators and escalators, but they're not as tall, they're not as long a runs. And so we save money there, and it gets people from the effective ground level to the platform level. So it improves that transit integration. We also kind of push the station a little bit further north on that site. So I think from a user perspective, it's a very similar location. But one of the key benefits to that is, you remember we had that plaza at the corner of Andover and Delridge, and there was a lot of discussion about what that would look like as a gateway to the neighborhood. We've opened up that space for a better development site that's more adjacent to the rest of the neighborhood. And so we'll be able to kind of look at that as we move forward on this. And with that, I want to go to the next slide and talk about some of the things we've heard from the community as far as development. So there's a lot on this slide. I'm gonna go left to right here. So we've gathered input over really since the start of this project on what's important to the community. We've worked closely with our partners at the city, looking at the Delridge neighborhood plans and gathering community input through station area planning, open houses. We've heard kind of shown in the center there's priority for a number of things. Services like shopping, food and drink, convenient errands while they're transferring between their modes. Recreation opportunities, I think, and then social services, one of which is childcare, right? There's childcare there now. We've heard a lot of interest in bringing that back. And then things like public safety, things that we all value. There's a desire to have those at the station, multi-use plaza, and then really efficient connections to the bus riders in the neighborhood. And then to the right, we show some of the types of transit-oriented development people are interested in. There's interest in affordable housing and ownership housing, larger apartments for families. A lot of the affordable housing in the city is smaller units. We've heard interest in the station having passenger restrooms, seating opportunities, places where people can take a break while they're waiting for their transit, and then flexible space for community-driven activities. With that said, the next slide kind of shows, and this pink box got a lot of attention at that forum because what we're trying to say is we have all of this feedback from the public. We have interest from the community, and we have basically a 0% design for this. So as we continue to advance the design of this project, we'll continue to advance the TOD work and hopefully, deliver this TOD near the same time as the transit in the area. By moving it to the south, closer to Delridge Way and Andover, we create more connections to the community. We also separate the construction of the station and the TOD, which could help us succeed in delivering these along the same timeline. So it's gonna be a fun topic moving forward, but this is where we're at with the Delridge station at this point. Next slide. So moving to Avalon. Next slide here. The boxes on this got a little bit funny, so it's like a puzzle, but it's this machine board tunnel and tunnel portal. And so just a couple of things on the Avalon station. We know it's not a good thing to eliminate a station. We don't take this lightly. But some of the things that we've looked at through this work is how are we going to provide the bus connections to the community so we can continue to serve those connections. Fortunately, the bus connections at Avalon Station are also either serving Alaska Junction and Delridge with this project or can easily be rerouted to those stations. And so we're able to pick up those riders at the station. The ridership, the walkability, I should say, for the Alaska and Avalon Station and the Delridge and Avalon Station, there's some overlap. Well, it's not containing all of that Avalon walk shed. There's some good overlap, so we're able to pick up a lot of those walkers, and others will be able to connect through transit. But the big thing here is by moving the portal to the east side of Avalon Way, where you see that pink bracket there, you avoid that entire gray line, which is, most of that gray line is above ground, and you're in a tunnel the entire way. So when we look at what that means to the properties, next slide. So with the Avalon Station, all of these boxes that are shown, the polygons around the properties in purple, those would have all been acquisitions and displacements. Some of them businesses, most of them single-family homes. And when we don't build the Avalon Station, we move the portal back to the east side of Avalon Way, we see this change. We will not need to acquire any of those parcels. And so when we're thinking about reduction in impacts, reduction in costs, it's a really big thing here. We've had a number of conversations with the neighborhood and the community, and there's a lot of excitement about this change. And overall, the ridership without the Avalon Station drops by about 200 riders. So it's a really small number when you're thinking about the tens of thousands that'll be riding this system. So out in Alaska Junction, we have some similar things to show. So again, key considerations here at Alaska Junction are, the passenger experience, how people are going to access the system, efficient light rail operations, and I'll talk more about that, and then property and community impacts. And on the map here, north is up, and we show a few of the key areas or businesses and locations in West Seattle. So you can see Jefferson Square on the left there, Whole Foods. I think a lot of folks know where the Whole Foods is. Taco Time out there near Avalon, and then you can see some of the streets labeled here. And we're going to switch it to north is to the left. Okay, and I'll describe this and go through it. This is the design that we looked at before in the preliminary engineering. This is starting from the left, from the north and going south. The boxes that are labeled tunnel, platform, crossover, and tail traps, those are all underground. It's effectively a tunnel, and those are just different elements of what's in that tunnel. The north entrance and the south entrance, that's where people would access the station from the ground level and then take the escalators and elevators and stairs down to the platform. It's about 65 to 70 feet in this PE configuration. And then just to talk about what the differences are on those boxes under 41st. So the tunnel gets the train to the platform. The train comes over the platform, it stops, all of the riders get off. And then the train needs to turn around to get to the other track, to go north. And to do so, it crosses over on a crossover to the other side of the track. It goes to the tail track. The operator gets out, walks to the other end of the 380-foot train, gets in, drives back to the platform, and picks people up. All of that takes time. It's a really kind of not an intuitive way to do it because of the curve on the tunnel. We were forced to do it this way. This is how we did it in Linwood. It's not ideal. Ideally, you want the crossover in front. And so we looked at that. And this is also about 800 feet of cut and cover construction. So big cost, displacements, a lot of work, a lot of noise. But because we did this, we had to move our power station to the south. That's what powers our trains. We had to move the ventilation structures to the south. That's how we keep the tunnel free of smoke should there be a fire or something. The next slide is going to show the updated configuration that we're looking at. You can see, I think, first off, that it doesn't go nearly as far south. And the reason for this is with the new configuration and not having that Avalon Station, we're able to move that crossover in front of the station. So the train would go through the crossover, get to the platform, passengers would get off the train, while the operators walk into the other end of the train, operator would get in the train, and they would pick up the new passengers and leave, right? And so you don't need that crossover, you don't need the tail tracks. And because you don't need all of that, you're able to look at that, the station entrance and the head house, we call it, and think about where would you put the ventilation facility because you don't need it 800 feet to the south. Where do you put the traction power substation? And stations like Roosevelt and U District, we have it in the station, so we're not needing other property. So it's a far more integrated station. I think one of the key notes here is it's pushed to the the east of 41st here. So it's in the private property that we would need to construct the station. And by no longer being in 41st, we're actually able to avoid some utilities and move the station up. So we're looking at this point about a 30 to 35 foot deep station. And so that's a lot closer for people accessing it from the street, but it's also a lot less money in the height of those vertical circulation elements you need, right? Those are really expensive both to purchase and to maintain. One of the key trade-offs here is, we only have one station entrance here. So we're showing a station entrance on the north side of Alaska. This is kind of closer to where the Avalon station would have been, but we don't have that south entrance. Though by bringing the station up, it's actually quicker to get to the station. So the extra street crossing there's offset a little bit there for people coming from the south. And then I think a big point here is we avoid the Jefferson Square property and a number of other properties. And the next slide kind of puts both of these together. And the top is the first one I described, the PE alignment. The bottom is the cost saving measure alignment. You can see all of those purple polygons again. On the top, we needed to acquire a tremendous amount of more property compared to this new alignment. It's notable to say that all of the properties that are needed for this cost saving measure alignment were identified as potentially affected in the environmental impact statement. And so while we still have some work to do with FTA on this, it's all within the range of what we've studied before. And so it should be an administrative type of process with them. We'll skip this one. Okay, this is gonna get you excited for the 30% review, right? So this is an early schematic, and the reason that we used this is because we wanted to show just how we were able to fit the ventilation and the TPSS within that single building. We still need to make this building look good and fit within the community, but from a schematic design, this is working. So you can see north is down and to the left. You can see Alaska Street and 41st there. So you can see people would access the station from Alaska and 40th, 41st. They'd go in at the street level, take the stairs or escalators down to the platform. And then on the left side, you can see those vertical elements. That's the fan plants. And then there's a TPSS in there as well. So the work on this station really begins to work it into the community. But these are some of the things that we would work with you on at the upcoming sub areas and then at the 30% design as well. So this is to wake you up if you're already asleep. We have work for you. And then the next slide. So it's not just impact reduction. I think I talked a lot about the impact reduction, and that really helps illustrate how we're able to reduce the cost. But when we came to the board in September of 2024, we had a number, it was like 6.7 to 7.3, but we've adjusted that up to $2025 now. So you're seeing that top number adjusted to $2025. And then the bottom number, this is the updated estimate based on the cost saving measure alignment that I described. So we got down to 4.9 to 5.3. There's still a range because we have work to do, but it's substantially lower, right? So we're seeing a $2.1, $2.6 billion reduction in the cost estimate from that 2024 estimate. And this is what the board took into account when they made their decision last Thursday to keep the project moving. So I got a couple more. Good. So I always like to show this slide because there's a lot of work that we do with the community, and it's not just community engagement with property owners or businesses. We're going out and we're doing engagement on stationary planning, so kind of a second spoke there, and then the environmental review phase that includes a really robust community engagement process as well, and these all happen in parallel. So we're kind of on the very far right there. We're anticipating taking that contract to the board to execute our full-blown final design services, if you will, in June. And we would have them on board and we would continue all of this engagement through the design phase. The next slide, I'll hit on a couple of things that we've done kind of more recently with these cost saving measures. So from September 2024, we've been here several times. We've done a number of community forums, as Sandra mentioned, and we've engaged with 100 plus community members through phone, email conversations. So really ensuring that the community that's most affected by this project understands what these changes are in real time. We've had, dozens of meetings with community members, businesses, and organizations to talk about the project changes to acquire feedback. And that feedback has directly informed some of the changes that we've made on this project, right? We need to make sure we maintain access to businesses as we're looking at our column layouts and things like that. And then we've been, I talked about the April 1st forum. So we presented at the Governor's Community Center there at Youngstown, and we had the full room with the overflow the second time, both times. So 400 plus, I think there's probably 500 people that we presented this information to. So really good engagement. At the first forum, we handed out cards with board member Mosqueda, that was before she was a board member. She collected those questions and we responded to all of those questions following the meeting. So really good engagement there. We've been meeting with the SOTO BIA, the West Yale Junction Association, so other BIAs to really get connected with the businesses to help them understand what's happening, to understand their needs and next steps on this project. And then the coordination will continue. There's some work in SOTO that we're doing on an accelerated design timeline because it's early works, enabling works. And we've been working with the business community out there to understand what that would look like. Things like bike lane reconnections or moving buses off the busway. We need to do this in advance. And so we've had really great conversations around that. And that gets me to my very last slide. You might be happy about that. So potential board action to advance final design, that's coming to the June board meeting. And that would be, beyond the cost saving measures, which we will continue to look at during final design, but really getting us to that 30%, getting us to that 60%, those milestones where you'll all engage on this again. There'll be sub-area committee meetings along the way. And then property acquisition and relocations will continue. And then, as I mentioned before, we'll continue to engage with the community and design refinements. Seeking feedback on stationary planning. One of the examples I gave today was the TOD work. That's going to be a community-led process or community partnership process. And that's all. So, thanks.
Thanks, Jason.
So I'm Gavin, and I guess I learned that very careful about off-the-cuff remarks to Jason here for presentation. I promise I'm pretty nice. I'm an architect, and we're not going to talk too much about drawings today. I'm kind of jealous of your presentation. That's what was really driving me, Jason. But what we're going to talk about Ballard Link. We're going to talk about what the enterprise initiative means for it. We're going to talk a little bit about our schedule moving forward, and then we'll do a recap of some of our engagement during the planning phase. So for those of you that don't know, the Ballard Link extension was included in the ST3 voter approved plan, and it adds nearly 8 miles of light rail service, including a new light rail only downtown tunnel. It has up to 9 new stations from Chinatown International District to Ballard, and it improves regional mobility by increasing connectivity and capacity through downtown Seattle to meet the projected transit demand. So the new tunnel is part of that capacity question. It provides high-capacity transit stations and increased options for multimodal access necessary for increased residential and employment density. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about the recent enterprise initiative, and Sandra gave a great overview. We go a little bit more in depth here. So in the updated ST3 system plan approved by the ST3 board, we established a phased approach to delivering the full Ballard Link extension from CID to Ballard. It fully funds the initial segment to Seattle Center. So fully funding includes construction and design, but confirms that planning and design will continue for the full BLD project. And we were directed by the board to return by August 1st with a date range for the ultimate delivery. So we're working on that. We are continuing the environmental review for the full project with the updated draft EIS expected later this year. And that's a touch point we're really looking forward to having with the SDC. We appreciate your letter that you sent that outlines what you're looking for. And we're also directed to use planning, environmental review, and final design to identify additional opportunities to reduce costs, reduce community impacts, and improve project delivery. So working on that behind the scenes. Agency and the board are going to pursue additional funding, financing tools, value capture, partnerships, and cost saving strategies to support the delivery of the second segment from Seattle Center to Mount. So this is very recent news. We're still integrating it, but that's the general lay of the land. On the next slide, we look at where we are and what's coming up. So you can see on the top, the environmental review. We had our NEPA scoping public comment period, and we've been developing the draft EIS, and we're waiting for that publication date. That's looking like fall later this year. And after that, there's going to be a public comment period, after which the board will confirm or modify the preferred alternative. Final EIS will be published, and the board will select the project to be built, followed by the federal record of decision, and we'll go into the design phase of the project. If you look on the next line for preliminary engineering, we had a similar experience just on the previous slide there, Justin. So we had a similar experience at the same time with West Seattle, where we were directed to look at cost savings because our estimates too came in high. But unlike Seattle, we were earlier in the environmental process. And so we're still kind of working through that. We will have station planning engagements as well, and a complete preliminary engineering followed by the final design phase. So you can see down at the bottom, we will have ongoing community engagement, but the next touch point will be once again that draft GIS public comment period. And once we have the publication date, we'll know more about that. Next slide, please. So as a recap of the engagement that we did during 2018, that was early scoping. From 2018 to 2019, we had neighborhood forums, stakeholder advisory group, elected leadership group, where we talked about high-level alignment decisions, followed by a scoping and public comment period. In 2019, the board identified the preferred alternatives and other alternatives to study in the EIS, and at this point, we were combined with the West Seattle EIS. Next slide. And in 2022, we published. But after that, in 2022, 2023, we were asked to do further studies for the BLE project, and we had what was called the NEPA scoping period. That was where we were looking at different options in the downtown and the CID. And from 2024 to 2026, we've been developing that draft EIS. So really the takeaway from this is we're waiting for that comment period. As an architect, I'm itching to go and present on this and hear your feedback. But that's really the milestone that we're waiting for. Pass it to Brian.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Brian Masick, project manager for the Graham Street Field Station project. We were just here in January. Don't have a ton of project-specific updates, but we'll start with the enterprise initiative decision because there was an amendment to the original board chair's plan that includes some great info on Graham. So number one in bold, Graham Street was added to the list of fully funded projects that Sandra presented. So that's really exciting news, great for the city of Seattle and South Seattle specifically. I'm not going to give all the project background, but as you may recall, this has been in planning since around 1999, 2000. Was deferred when Central Link project to be built was selected and was reinvigorated with ST3 plan in 2016. So it's very exciting. We've already had a $25 million grant awarded to us, the RAISE grant, which will apply during construction. So this incorporates that into the project funding. Like all the other projects mentioned so far, identifying future cost saving opportunities. We've already done some, but we'll be looking for more throughout PE. And I think it is important to note, though, that our project is not a link extension, so we don't have as much opportunity to look at different places it could go or things it could do. We're either building the station or not, and so it's more of a traditional BE exercise around cost savings. And of course, we'll be pursuing additional grants along the way. Another interesting piece added to this was any savings from the Pinehurst station, which is wrapping up in the next several months, could be applied to Graham Street for funding. A piece specifically related to you all is looking to our city partners to expedite permitting and resolving right-of-way related risks and support cost reduction. Another one, project, both Graham and Boeing Access Road are carrying a little more contingency than some of the other SC3 projects. And that's because infill stations are inherently more complex. And we also don't have geotech information yet. And so as we get through PE, as we get more information about the project, we can adjust that. And then this was an interesting one added. We need to present a plan next year that includes all the cost saving opportunities and alternative funding and financing with the help of partners at the city of Seattle, King County. And then the big one at the end, if there is a funding gap still remaining after all of that, the city of Seattle will be a third-party contribution of last funding in, not to exceed $30 million. Yes, so not much has changed here. Pink is where we still are. So we completed conceptual engineering. We are still in environmental review. The board gave approval to advance the PE in January. So we started that in February. We've been wrapping up outstanding questions from conceptual engineering over the last few months, and we are fully moving into PE right now. Looking to wrap up environmental review in Q4 of this year and early next year. And so just covering engagement, the last several months have been very focused on the enterprise initiative. We supported with board member and elected official briefings. We've attended all of the North South King town halls, in addition to one specifically at Graham related to Boeing Access Road. And then we've also supported our city of Seattle partners on transportation survey they did. But coming up, now we know the project is funded, we know we can tell people, we can get out there this summer, give the results to everyone. And our next piece that we're going to be focusing on stationary planning, so access to the project via bike, head, transit, and then start those conversations around land use planning, zoning. Once we get into that fall, winter time frame, we'll be wrapping up our environmental review process. We'll have SEPA comment, but then we'll also, once we're done with NEPA, we'll be able to start having conversations with property owners, start getting very interesting graphics that Gavin would like to see about the station, so the public can see it, so that you all can see it. We can start having those good detailed conversations, and then continue. So next steps, jump into community engagement, and like I said, wrap up environmental review later this year and come back to you for our first official project review. And then we're going to be wrapping up PE Q1, Q2, and jumping into final design.
So as we close out here, when are you going to see us next? We'll have our next quarterly briefing towards the end of the year, so Q3, Q4 this year. We have a couple of subcommittees set up for West Seattle Link, so Jason will be back to share more details there if you want more details from him. But we'll dive into a little more depth on some of those post-PE design updates. Then the Ballard team, as Gavin mentioned, DEIS will be published later on this year. And so during the public comment phase, we'll be making the rounds around every group within the city. So the design commission will be part of that roadshow there. And then as Brian mentioned, Graham Street infill station will have a PE review likely towards the end of the year or early next year. So that's all we have here today.
Do you want to do discussion and Q&A right now on this, or do you want to see city stuff first?
I think we do a little bit now. I think we
Yeah.
could start with some
Okay,
questions now. So that, well, I think we can, I mean, there's ways to break up the questions that we were thinking about. We could either start with sort of some larger questions about kind of the whole systemic ones, and then we can get into the work on these specific lines and stations. But I wondered if we could maybe, Tatum, any questions to start on the kind of more, and if you don't have any general questions, just say so and we'll go straight into the stations.
No, I think I've captured in our list.
Okay.
I have a station area specific question.
Okay. Any other general ones? All right. Well, why don't we just get right into station area ones? But can we start with, maybe we could use the PLE and SLE kind of breakdown? Which do you have, question?
Mine is for the Delridge.
Okay.
So it's not the first.
Well, let's just start with Delridge. Even so.
Thanks for the presentation. I know you all have been going through a lot of presenting right now, so it's really, really appreciate how informing this is. And I had a question for Jason about the Delridge station, because I know we reviewed the PE plans for it and now it's in a very different place. So this is kind of a question about what the timing is and alignment in terms of now developing for this new location in relationship to environmental review for it. And then also questions about when we were, the prior designs we were looking at, there was a lot of concern and discussion around Longfellow Creek. And we're, talking a lot about the need for collaboration with SPU and their consultants. And so I'm wondering about, with this new site that's been identified, how those conversations are going now with city partners, and then how that aligns with environmental review.
Good.
Hey, how's it
A
going?
couple of questions there. So the Delta station is unknown location. In fact, we shipped a little bit further. It's the same parcel.
No, I know. Yeah, I was like, there's no way Ashley Parker is leaving.
On the
Exactly. When I forget.
Let me see.
I'll skew down.
That person. Okay.
So it follows an alignment north of Andover. So we'd already kind of worked through that alignment, the draft EIS and the final EIS with the city to kind of understand what that would look like. And we've had a robust discussion. We called it phase 1B. So the second phase of our Jacobs team being here, working with the city to look at that. One of the challenges with the alignment that went over Longfellow Creek, we would have taken out the health club, we would have been over the overwater portion, but that also presented opportunities to do some restoration on that site. With this new alignment, we would not need to acquire that property. And so those opportunities would not be there. And we also wouldn't have the overwater structure that would require the mitigation there. So we'd be crossing it north of Andover where it's in the pipe.
Mhm.
And so we haven't had as robust conversations with SBU
Mhm.
because we're not having the same effects
Mhm.
to Longfellow Creek.
That's great. Yeah, I know that it sounds like there's a big win there for that. I just was trying to understand the proximity in the diagram that you showed us, like
Yeah.
if there was any touching of the footprint or if the guideways were fully in a new location.
Yeah, we'll have more detail at the upcoming subcommittee, and then you'll see it at 30% again. But essentially, the guideway is following the north side of Andover. So spoiler alert, we're gonna have to figure out a way to keep the bikes moving through the neighborhood, because there's that bike path there. But then we kind of cross the north edge of the Newport property, where they're using it kind of for some storage yards and things. And then we start to curve to the south. We get into the hillside there for the part of the storage. So we are quite a bit further north of the creek there. And then as far as the environmental process, I think I mentioned it before, but we looked at, I think it was 24 alternatives with all the segments in the EIS. And we looked at a lot of lines on a map, a lot of station locations. And we really felt it was important as we look through these cost savings to stay within the range of what was in the EIS. We've previewed these a couple of times with FTA. We haven't locked things down yet to be able to really have those conversations, because there's still a couple of items that we're doing further investigation on. We want to bring everything to them at once, but we feel pretty good about where we're at with FTA and the environmental process.
Great.
That's a good question.
Okay. Is there any other questions focused on Del Ridge? Well, let's go to Alaska Junction. How about that? Okay, Alaska Junction, this is a question that is in a way kind of a larger systems question for stations. I mean, you are making the board has made the decision for Alaska Junction to have one entrance. And you made a strong case for a lot of benefits from other aspects of the acquisition, great savings costs, so forth. But how do you kind of deal with the question of whether people crossing the road, or sort of the safety of the pedestrians, as well as just numbers? I mean, the numbers I can imagine being accommodated with one entrance, but you also maybe could respond to that a little bit, because that's always been something we've looked at other stations. This question of when you for all kinds of good reasons reduce to one entrance, but you do lose certain redundancy and opportunity for and potentially safety for folks who don't have to cross the street.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it's a really important thing to look at. And Eric and the city team are here now, so sure, it's something that we're going to have to continue to work with the city and Metro on how we're going to make this a really great connection for people that need to cross the street. I think Southwest Alaska Street, I think the long-term vision for that is to be a more pedestrianized, bus-focused street. And so I think based on work that Eric and the team have done, there's really great opportunity out there. Personally, I think about getting off my bus at Roosevelt every morning and crossing a two-lane one-way road, and then I look at Southwest Alaska Street, and I think that if I can do it every morning, I think there's going to be really good opportunity to improve it there, especially with the vision that Eric and the team have. So lots of work to come, and I think it'll be a good discussion at future meetings. But it's a trade-off. I just want to caveat one thing on the board direction was to eliminate the Avalon station. They've seen a lot of what we presented today, but they didn't necessarily make a note on any of those things. But we know that we're constrained by the finance plan, and so a second entrance, may not be affordable. But the only thing that they told us was construct to Alaska Junction with no Avalon. So we need to do that with the board and the FTA as we move forward.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you. So did anyone else have an Alaska Junction?
I have a WSLE question.
Well, if anyone has any, are there any more, okay, WSLE?
So with regard, just to follow up to Kate's question with regard to the whole alignment. So Jason, you kind of just referenced it. I just wanted to ask for a little more clarification. So you did the FEIS, you got the ROD. I'm paraphrasing, but it sounds like when you were developing what you were calling the cost savings alignment, you were really trying to stay within the range of what you had looked at in the earlier environmental document. So now the board's made a decision, I think, about that alignment. And now does the FTA actually have to renew the ROD, or is that the ultimate? How does that get blessed, I guess, from an environmental standpoint? What's the final action that has to happen there?
So it's like everything is a little bit complicated. So the board has not updated the project to be built. The board has updated the ST3 plan. It includes West Seattle.
That's a good clarification.
As a constructed project without Avalon. They've seen a lot of these previews. We know what it takes to get to this dollar figure. FTA is our partner, and we've been engaging with them throughout this entire process. But ultimately, they're going to have to look at the changes in the context of what was in the environmental documentation.
Right.
And we've gotten early indication that it's within the range. And there's typically changes after a record of decision to a project. Right. Changes here, and we keep FTA. We see this as a very similar thing. We studied the no Avalon in the EIS. And so once we're ready to, we don't want to piecemeal this to FTA. We want to bring everything at the same time for the official kind of review. We would do that, I think, middle of this year or later this year. It's the middle of the year now, so that's not silly, but the middle of the second half of this year, I guess.
So then does the board also decide or redecide the project to be built? Is that still a subsequent decision that the board is making about WSLE?
That's to be determined.
Okay.
I mean, I think the direction now is no Avalon. It's
right.
Not clear to me whether the board would need to take another action.
Okay. So I think that's a really important clarification that the ST3 plan was approved, but the project to be built and the ROD is still a little bit not finally decided.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say that the ROD would ever need to change.
Okay.
There's, like I said, there's refinements to projects that happen all the time that don't require a change in the ROD. The commitments in the ROD would still remain.
Okay.
So it's just we need to kind of take it through the steps as we go and make sure that we keep our partners both at the city, because the council voted on a transitway agreement as well, right? And so that did have an Avalon station, did have the tunnel portal located where it is. So that would need to be updated, but we need to do things in order, and we're going to advance final design on the project, similar to what we described today. And then that process will continue to keep us moving while we do all this other work.
Okay. Thank you.
Brian, you had a WSLE or?
Yeah, just a future proofing question. I know our long-term goal is to go to Burien and other neighborhoods further south. I think in the future, we'd love to hear about what we're doing in this project to allow that to happen. I know the tail track provided a really nice constructability option to be able to extend further south without affecting the active station. And if we're getting rid of that, how would we construct to the south without really affecting that station? It would be something that we'd like to hear.
Yeah, we can bring that back. There is a provision in the design to ensure that we have room to connect to the south, and with the tail track and the crossover, it was there, but it was also necessary to operate the station. So we had the same kind of space constraint at the end, and we had that provision there as well.
Understood. Just as we go into PE,
we'll bring it forward.
We really want to make sure we're not spending money now to then have to demolish and redo.
Yeah. And to Justin's point, sorry.
I was just going to add
Right.
that as part of the enterprise initiative, there was also direction to move forward with some of those HCP.
Yes.
So it's good timing.
We'd love to hear that. Thank you.
So, maybe Valerie, we actually did write, and you mentioned it, a letter to you all about the PLE, and looking forward to a future update on it because it's in a different phase. But I guess, did we want to take this opportunity to have some questions on the We don't need to get
No,
in,
we all know.
we know there'll be answers in the future, but there's maybe some other types of issues to bring up vis-a-vis
Two
the,
questions about the BLE part.
okay,
Just a good time.
great. Well, let's do that now.
Is there clarity on South Lake Union Station staying or not staying? And if it's not staying, are there studies happening on how that community and that like large number of people should be serviced?
Yeah, so we're in the environmental process and we have the three alternatives, and one of the alignments called DT4 does have the consolidated station, and that means that would be consolidating Denny and South Lake Union. Right now, the preferred alternative does maintain South Lake Union, but until we get through the environmental process, we won't have clarity on what the actual outcome is.
Thank you. The second question was about TOD opportunities at the downtown stations. We've heard overbuilt studies about how that's going to be approached. Could you just give us a little bit of background on that and where you guys are with that study?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we just had a great report go to the executive committee this morning about some of the TOD opportunities, which is online now. But we're working with our TOD partners on joint development opportunities at 5 of the stations on Ballard. So yes, we're working on the preliminary engineering side on buying the station box, looking at site circulation and things like that. So we'll be able to talk about that more after the environmental process, but definitely it's top of mind for how we would plan for overbuild.
Will that be a part of the environmental process?
It's a separate stream of work, so we probably wouldn't cover it too much during the environmental. That's really looking at the station specifically. Not necessarily the overbuild.
Just a quick question.
And also we should just do a time check that we have.
Yeah.
Time for.
So I guess, well, maybe Ruben, the last question, it looks like.
Yeah. Just a quick question on Soto. Is that still connecting to the future Lander Bridge, or is that kind of different now? Because it's just the axon you showed I don't know, I didn't see the bridge and all that. Is that sort of a totally out now, or do we know? I wouldn't say it's totally out, but it wasn't from that. Okay, that's a good observation. It's something we'll definitely want to talk about at the subcommittee meeting. But there's some changes to that bridge and the structure width that provides a different type of access. Okay. Okay, yeah, I was just curious. Yeah, obviously it's kind of detailed for station reviews, but
away from the bridge. Yeah. That render had it staggered with the post office, and I think that separates it from the Lander difficulties. That was a close proximity that was hard to.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. It was, well, like, what time are we at?
3:10.
3:10.
3:10 is on my computer too. But, so do we need, I think we probably need to move on.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Yes.
So. Just.
All right, well, we.
There's plenty of trees in the forest.
Okay. All right, why don't
Yeah, that might be fun.
Yeah.
You're on the line. was in a training today.
Yeah.
It's not part of the presentation, so she got she got full pass today. Full pass today. We're pulling it all together. The three of us, we've got Eric trained on line baby stuff.
Is it twice? Yeah, he said.
Yeah. You want to
Sort
folks
of
in the
took the
gallery.
Changes are made after RODs. Right.
Presentation.
Less impact.
Okay. Yes. Same thing, different crew. Thank you for having us. It's been a while. And thank you also for all the effort, I think, on the commission side, the city side, and Sound Transit side, and making this a joint. I know we've kind of done that in the past sometimes, but not all the time. And I think, moving forward, especially as we're really trying to start moving these projects forward through permitting, I think it's going to be really advantageous for us to be together. I'm gonna kick us off with a little bit on kind of city, just a few comments from city leadership. I don't have slides to support it, just wanted to offer a little bit on the enterprise initiative and the update to the ST3 system plan before handing it off to, I think Eric is your first, or Eric T is first online to talk about our topics today. But I want to actually, maybe we'll go through the agenda quick, the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about who's sharing this slide. There we go. Thank you. We're going to talk a little bit today about our ongoing work on racial equity and how we're applying the RET specifically to ELE in West Seattle. We're going to talk, focus most of our presentation on our planning work group and the various activities, and then wrap up as always with the SDC point. But before getting into the slides, I just wanted to offer a little bit of comments from the city and the mayor's office on the recent board action last week. I don't know if anyone watched the meeting, but it was a very, very long meeting that really culminated so much work on the part of Sound Transit staff and the board and folks from across the region. And I think first and foremost, moving forward on West Seattle Link Extension is a huge, top priority for the city and for the region. Lots of debate for a long time over what shovel ready meant, but in fact, this project is shovel ready, and we are ready to support getting those shovels in the ground and moving it forward. Really excited for the upcoming board actions. As Kevin, you noted, there will be some updated actions that the city will need to take as well to update that alignment to make sure that we're ready to issue those permits and get that project going. The second really big win was the South Graham Street infill station, moving that out of the chairs package from unfunded into the affordable system plan. Huge priority for the city, so much so that we were willing to put in place that up to $30 million of third-party funding. So huge priority, big win. Very happy that that project is moving forward. Where the system plan was more disappointing, of course, was for Ballard Link Extension. Had really hoped that we were going to be able to get further in the system plan than the Seattle Center interim terminus, but are very hopeful that the steps are in place to continue that final design work all the way through Market Street and to find the eventual financial capacity or additional revenue cost savings that will allow the agency to move forward into construction for the rest of that project. One thing that was really loud, I think, as Sandra mentioned in the boardroom, a lot of support for Ballard Link Extension. I think just about every single board member, was on the record at some point during that meeting saying that they want to see the delivery of Ballard Link Extension all the way to Northwest Market Street. We do too. I think where we really need to roll our sleeves up and work with the agency and work with our partners across the region is on all of those next steps coming out of the work plan from last week. So going down to Olympia, looking for additional tools, looking for cost savings measures as we are working through the design work for Ballard Link Extension, because ultimately there isn't anything in that system plan that
obligates the agency to deliver the rest of that project. And so we really need to be working together with all of that good intention and with all of that commitment to make sure that that happens. And we're very hopeful coming out of last week's meeting and all of that good intention coming out of board members, and look forward to our partnership with Sound Transit staff to find a path forward for that project. And that's the work ahead. Yeah, I think with that, there's the enterprise initiative. This was the first of many major deliverables and milestones in the enterprise initiative work. And there's a lot of work ahead with the high capacity transit studies that we mentioned, the update to the long range financial plan, the regional long range transit plan. And we look forward to being engaged in that process and touching base with you all of these quarterly meetings as that work progresses. With that, I'm going to hand things off to our team to walk through the work that we have. And I think, Eric, you're online. You're going to kick us off.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, Commissioner and everyone. Eric Trin here, SC3 Equity Advisor.
A little bit hard to hear you. I'm wondering if you could speak up. I think it's on less.
Is it hard to hear? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Is it better?
The lower right corner.
Say something.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioner and everyone. Eric Trin here, SC3 Program
Great, thank
Equity
you.
Advisor with the City South Drive Program team. I apologize, I cannot be there in person today, but I hope to be there in person next time. I will be sharing a brief update on the city team equity work across the project. As you see here, just a quick refresh, the Joint Agency Racial Equity Toolkit outcomes. These were developed as through a joint agency process between the City of Seattle and South Transit Agency between 2018 and 2022. It's an ongoing process. We have a total of 11 red outcomes. The slide shows 6 project-wide red outcome that are guiding principle for the joint agency equity commitments for West Seattle Link Attention, for Ballot Link Attention Project, and the Graham's Infill Station Project. Next slide, please. And for this slide, it shows 3 outcomes specific for the Chinatown International District Station, and we also have 2 red outcomes that are specific to the Del Ridge corridor. These outcomes really guide how both agencies approach equity throughout project delivery. And they are an ongoing process that South Transit Agency and the city team continue to engage with community. We continue to identify opportunity for community participation and integrating the red outcome into the process. Next, please. And for Ballot Link Attention Project, a quick update on the Racial Equity Toolkit report. South Transit is advancing the Joint Agency Red Report alongside the draft EAS process. We, as mentioned, last time we completed Route 1 city review in Q4 2025, and Route 2 is coming up following the draft EAS publication. We are actively coordinating with South Transit Agency team to help community of color and low-income population understand and inform about the upcoming Racial Equity Toolkit report and how to use it to inform their draft EAS comment. And of course, their focus would be the draft EAS public comment. Next, please. For West Seattle Link Attention Project, as the project moves into phase 2, our focus has shifted to looking for opportunity to integrating the Racial Equity Toolkit outcomes into the project delivery. As a city equity lead for the program, I'm working very closely with our engagement lead and the South Transit team, engagement team that are working on West Seattle Link Attention Project to identify opportunity to find a way for the racial equity toolkit outcome to be integrated into the project level work stream. So that's a lot of work in the background, and we continue to work with South Georgia team, which is really great partner on this process. And that is the last of my slide, and happy to answer any question later. I'm going to pass my word to my colleague Eric R.
All right, great. So just as a reminder of how the city supports light rail development in the cities, there's several city-led projects or efforts that we're doing. One is stationary planning, which is led by the Office of Planning Community Development, probably Katie here. Not really focuses on a broader area around the station. So the diagram at the top, sort of farther right. We also lead design and planning for the access projects to the stations that are funded by South Transit's non-motorist access allowance. And then we also lead development design for street transit planning efforts, which are really making improvements to the right of way in front of the stations and their entrances. We'll sort of just walk through each of the projects and sort of where we're at on these different elements of what we're doing. So the next slide, I'm going to hand it to Katie, who's going to talk about West Seattle station planning and setting results.
Yeah. I realize we now need to update this map, so didn't need too much on that. All right, so stationary planning. So OBCD in partnership with SDOT actually is leading this work. And so this is really about the development of stationary plans. Right now we are focusing in West Seattle, so around the Delaware station and the West Seattle Junction station. You'll see on that map, there's sort of a darker colored area and a lighter colored area. The darker colored area is about that half-mile walkshed. It also sort of coincides with a lot of our existing urban center areas. That's where we're really focusing on a lot of the land use opportunities. That broader area that you see is sort of the more faint color, including some of the little ducks down the corridor. That is our study area. And this is where SDOT is also taking a look at some of their potential transportation projects, just because obviously people need to get to the station further away than a half mile. So they're expanding their scope a little bit broader to encompass some of those areas. So that also includes a lot of the BRT stops on the along those corridors to make sure people can access those BRT stops, as Delaware is expected to have a pretty high bus transfer. So for these two station areas, we're running them sort of alongside each other in parallel process. We wrapped up phase one of our engagement early this spring. Our summary is almost complete. That'll be out soon. I'll talk a little bit about our key takeaways. And so we are in the phase right now of taking all of that engagement, actually starting to develop some of the strategies and ideas for that plan. And we'll be going back out this summer to those communities for additional feedback on those emerging land use directions and also some SDOT project ideas. So for phase one, do you want to do this now?
Yeah.
Over here? Okay. All right. So from our phase one engagement, I'll do a couple of key takeaways because I know you guys are always interested in what we heard and what we're thinking about. So for West Seattle Junction, we did hear support for more density in housing, particularly near the station. We heard even support for much taller buildings near the station. There was definitely mixed response about additional density, like over 3 to 5 stories as you sort of get out from the station. We heard a lot about more public and pedestrian spaces, particularly on California Avenue, and really thinking about that as how it can become a regional destination with a new light rail station. And we heard a lot about just the things that people already love and how we can build on what's already working well. So really this feeling of community identity and authenticity that people feel for their community in West Seattle Junction, particularly as it relates to the commercial district, but just sort of the homegrown nature of it. The walkability of it. And really a lot of the direction we got was on improving the comfort and the enjoyment of walking and bicycling and taking transit. And really a lot just around sort of public open spaces. How can people be in space together in more places within the area? For Delridge, we heard a lot about retaining and enhancing all of the natural spaces, particularly with Longfellow Creek there, and really working to enhance a lot of those pedestrian infrastructure assets that are connecting them or thinking about where they need additional connections. That east-west connection is always a challenge for Delridge because of its topography. There was definitely a lot of support for growing a much more dense sort of mixed-use core with neighborhood serving retail and services, particularly, as we know, grocery and restaurants, especially in light of a lot of those businesses being displaced by the light rail. We heard some mixed support for density over that 3 to 5 stories or building height elsewhere outside of the immediate station area. And we also heard a very strong focus on really focusing on how we can grow an intergenerational neighborhood. So both families who are growing with young children and also aging in place. And those are sort of 2 areas where we need to focus on both housing supply, but also those community assets that can support the whole sort of life cycle. For both places, we heard a lot about trees. Everybody wants more trees. And we heard just a lot about third spaces, free public spaces to use, all of that kind of stuff. There was definitely also an openness to taller buildings if those buildings are paired with certain features or community assets, particularly larger units, so 3+ bedrooms, commercial and cultural spaces at grade, high quality on-site open space, be it private or public, or enhanced public realm improvements. So wide sidewalks, lots of tree plantings, plazas, things like that. Phase 2, yeah, we'll be out this summer. We're working right now on the dates that will be out and about, and we will pass that on to Valerie to pass on to all of you when we finalize that.
And then the other part for West Seattle we're working on is the non-mortgage access loan. So as a reminder, there's $30 million that Soundtrack has for funding construction of access projects. So we're doing the work of identifying, planning, and designing those projects right now. In 2024, there are 11 projects that were at conceptual design done. And all that work got put on hold with the enterprise initiative, but now there's a little more certainty about stations and where they're going to be located. We're sort of starting to advance that. A key part of that was just last week, we obligated a grant from the Sound Regional Council of $5.7 million to take all those projects that we identified to 100% design. So they're at conceptual like 10% level now. They're moving for years to 100%, and then we'll have the Sound Transit funding to help construct those. So that'll be a body of work that's really off. We'll be sort of looking at for years. And then also, as Jason touched on earlier, actually, I said all was that we already have developed concept plans, and from Alaska as well. That work's been done. Just showing its value. The station, people, regardless of how the station plans can change. Okay, and then for Ballard, this project is a little more farther out. So, but we are starting to do the street concept planning process for Ballard. So we're just now launching, start working on the Seattle Center Station area and looking at how we can improve the right way around there. And then we're also starting to think about what are the other street concept planning areas we want to do for other stations. So we're looking at the Denny and Dearborn stations as places we're interested in advancing street concept plans. Specifically for Dearborn Station, a lot of that would actually be building on the work that was done as part of the South Downtown Hub work. The joint ST-led project that the city's been very involved in that over the last few years. That would be taking those plans and advancing a little bit and extending it maybe beyond the extent that that South Downtown planning process was looking at for areas around those stations. Last one, Graham. So we're also doing a very right in the middle of stationary planning work on Graham. Dave's team's meeting. There was.
It's a partnership.
It's a partnership. There was and showing the partnership like really focusing on transportation and land use changes. So this spring, I think April and May, there was a survey of the public that really focused on the transportation improvements around the station that are needed. And you can sort of see the map of the areas we're looking at for the days. That information will feed directly into both the stationary planning as well as the access work that I'll touch on a little bit. But then I think later in the summer, this will be second phase of information to focus on more of the land use changes that are happening around the station. And then to the non-mortgage access allowance updates, we have $5.5 million for construction of projects. We're a little earlier in the phase, so we're now just identifying potential projects around the station that we're interested in doing conceptual designs for. That's probably what the survey will be informing. And then also later summer, we'll be doing the screening process to sort of identify as our broad list of projects we're looking at, which are the ones we actually want to use the planning and design for. That's where I'm going. And back to Katie.
So TD planning, so we'll talk about two buckets. So one is the city-led work about equitable transit-oriented development, and the second is our supporting Sound Transit's work and really advancing their TOD. So I'm going to do my best to be Alberta Black today, who's running this program and couldn't be here. So I'm not be able to answer all of your questions, but I'll do my best. So our ETOD work, or equitable transit-oriented development work, is funded by an FTA grant for $1.75 million, and it's really focused on community-driven solutions to displacement pressures that are often associated with like light rail construction. So there's a couple different pieces of this grant that we're doing. The first is a community advisory group. So this is a citywide advisory group that's working through a series of modules that are on a variety of different planning and community development topics. So there's been a lot of internal and external guest speakers, subject matter experts on different topics, lots of discussion, and that group is working towards a set of policy recommendations that will be finalized this fall. Our place-based groups, which is that second bucket, there's two of them. There's the CID place-based group and the Dollars place-based group. So these are really looking more specific to those neighborhoods in terms of what might ETOD look like there. The CID group is underway, and they are, so they're underway. They're starting to meet, I believe, like right now or maybe last week. And then we're going to be launching the Delridge place-based group in the next couple of months. And so again, these are really trying to get sort of that preliminary project development, trying to turn those projects really into cut sheets so that they can start, figuring out funding or doing more there. But it's really about bringing in these organizations, bringing in folks who have those really great ideas for equitable development projects and sort of helping get them off the ground. And then the third bucket is our remnant parcels technical analysis. So this is the city-led side of the remnant parcels work. And sorry, I know you don't like it when we say remnant parcels, to explore the opportunities both at a conceptual level, but then also site-specific for all of those sort of non-housing TOD projects. So for the city side of this, we're working with a consultant who is sort of creating what I'll call an inventory of like ideas, right? And this is what are all those cool things that you can do on some of these kind of goofy, small, not very developable parcels, so that we have this tool to use for engagement and for going out to community once those parcels are identified through Sound Transit's process, so that we can work with Sound Transit in how we talk to community about what uses might be suitable, which ones aren't, and why, and then also what types of partnerships or funding does it make to actually does it take to actually make these things happen. So that's the work that will be happening under that part of the ETOD. And then so the second bucket, advancing joint development. So OPCD and SDCI and others are really trying to work very closely with Sound Transit so we can identify some of those permitting complexities to joint development and figure out how we can either future-proof that a little bit or find different pathways and how we can actually make that happen through our permitting processes. We are also working to advance some of those zoning barriers or other sort of development regulation barriers there might be for joint development or some of those TOD sites. And then again, just sort of through our co-planning process, always working with Sound Transit within our internal teams to really optimize those TOD sites because there's a lot of needs, right? And there's only so much space. So making sure we're trying to really balance that and get good TOD sites.
All right, that to kind of close us out, we've got our upcoming touch points, of course, our formal project reviews that are have been a little bit of a moving goalpost, if you will, throughout this update to the ST3 system plan. But now that is behind us, looking forward to those formal project reviews, picking up with South Graham Street Infill Station, the West Seattle subcommittee meetings, and then further on out the West Seattle 30% reviews, and then eventually back out in 27 the Ballard Link Extension project reviews, and then of course we have our quarterly updates, but also the possibility of special topics with the full commission or subcommittee. This might make sense during the comment period or at other periods. Closes us out.
Yeah, Valerie, I think we could probably have some questions.
Yeah.
Well, I have a few, but maybe I could start with others. And I think we can, there's a way to look at this. There's the NMAA, there's the TOD planning, there's the overall stationary planning work, and then there's also, of course, the RET, the race and
Racial equity.
yeah, racial equity. The T, I'm having problems. I'll get that. Thank you. But anyways, so we need to, any of those are ones that we should get some clarification on today. Thank you.
Yeah, I can start us off. Could you go back to the very first slide, or maybe it was the second? I think it had the 11 or 6 outcomes. Yeah, that's the one. So I think I got a really clear picture on sort of the engagement approach to incorporating feedback and suggestions from different community members, but I am curious if you can elaborate on kind of how you're working together, sort of applying this RET framework in the team's decision making around the DEIS, and specifically, I mean, I'm curious. There's probably a lot to say, but just sort of at a high level, can you elaborate on how you're working together, how beyond engagement, this sort of outcomes really get translated into the decision making that the teams are working together alongside towards. And I do want to highlight past harms. So how do you unpack that?
Eric, I'm happy to give a couple concrete examples, but this is your space, and I want to make sure that you have a chance to chime in. You mentioned specifically the DEIS, and so I think there's there's possibly dozens upon dozens of different ways that the RET outcomes and that our transportation equity framework that we use at SDOT affects or shapes the decision making or the day-to-day way that we carry out our work, or that's what we aspire to. There are a couple real specific examples that I could give that I think might be useful. One would be looking back on our comments on the DEIS back in January of 2022, which was the joint DEIS for West Seattle and Ballard. When we did those comments, we provided comments, of course, on the, all of our technical SMEs were commenting on the various evaluation of impacts and appropriate mitigation in the different chapters. But we did have an entire section that we just called out that centered those RET outcomes on particularly the RET priority communities. So, and I'm going to speak specifically to Chinatown International District. Our comments in that draft EIS, and actually previous to that, the administrative draft EIS that we did with Sound Transit, really focused on the meaningful engagement of community members and the repairing of past harm. And one of the really important elements in the CID was allowing the CID community to have agency in the decision making of projects that are happening to them. And because of that application of those RET outcomes and talking with community during the DEIS comment period, when at the time just the 4th Avenue South and 5th Avenue South options were on the table, there was a very active conversation with community about whether or not they felt they had enough information at the time to move forward with a recommendation of one or the other. And the city, coming out of that process, ended up having a council resolution that passed later on that year that in that community did not take a position on the board action for a preferred alternative for either one, really felt that and called out in that council resolution the need for additional community process. And that was really pointing right back to the RET outcomes and the work that we had been doing to develop this list that you see here that really goes all the way back to 2018 when we were doing that initial alternatives analysis work with community and with Sound Transit. So that's one example that I think is probably a poignant and, looking back on it, a very consequential example, is that led into some additional alternatives being discussed and now has shaped a different preferred alternative in that community. But it's one just example kind of pulling the thread through of how we've taken some of the RET outcomes and tried to apply it to our work. Eric, this is your day-to-day if you want to provide additional input.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think just to build on what Sarah shared is that I think the these red outcome were developed with community input, with a very intensive community engagement process, and just so we continue to inform with the engagement activity for. So I cannot speak for the engagement lead, but because I'm working very closely with her on coordinating with South Carolina team on engagement. So some of the strategy that we making sure that the community are meaningfully involved is that we looking at how we can utilize community liaison program, right? Helping people who speak the same language, doing community outreach, and helping the South Carolina agency and the South Carolina program team to share information, help them inform and understand what are impact, what are the alternative around the station. So that's one way to look at the meaningfully engaged community of color and avoiding past harm. And I think another part is that in the monthly coordinations, the engagement lead, which is Willow Russell and we continue to work with South Carolina and identify who are the community that are often impacted but not having a space on access to this project, so that we identify opportunity to engage them. So I think those are some of the examples, but there's a lot of work in the background, and I would love to follow up with you with the engagement lead to share more what we have been doing with South Carolina team.
Can I add something? Thank you, Eric. That was really helpful. I think moving forward, it would be great to see more of the detail of how those engagements are coming into identifying those opportunities you talked about and how they're shaping these planning effort that's happening on the city side of things. We'll all agree on that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I'm also hearing that mostly the determination of what past harm is that certain communities were not involved in the planning decision-making process, and now they are being centered. But it doesn't sound like the technical team are necessarily sort of evaluating alternatives based on some of these outcomes. Is that?
I would counter that it is our intention. And I would say that the work, I'm going in the Wayback Machine now, kind of spontaneously. The work that we did following the DEIS and through the additional alternatives that were considered for CID was looking at, in that station example, was looking at the past harm of projects, dating hundreds of years ago, but all, through as recently as the construction of the first Hill streetcar and just a host of, more recent examples of where there was a good deal of construction disruption, and in the words of many community members, projects that were done to community rather than with community or for community. So really trying to work through those processes to try to understand what are the benefits that the community is seeking from these projects, and how can we minimize the harm from the construction itself, and then maximize those benefits. So yes, absolutely looking at the pros and cons of 4th Ave South, 5th Ave South, and then the north and south alternatives that eventually emerge. And with all of them, there were trade-offs on these very bullets that you see in front of you, of some that fared better and some that fared worse. And so we did try to bring that lens, absolutely, and do that analysis. And that was very much with our technical experts, or SMEs as well. So folks that were looking at the construction impacts that would be associated with some of the alternatives, looking at what that would mean for displacement, what that would mean for disruption to community and for various lengths of time, and then balancing that against the potential benefits of those alternatives.
Thank you. Thanks. We have about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to ask whether people have questions. I would come back to this, but does anyone have any questions about the TOD planning work? Yeah, Ben.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering if you could explain a little bit more about what the process is for including future partners with the TOD work, or is it all affordable housing? I know South Transit, I think South Transit has a affordable housing mandate. What is the program around how you're selecting partners for that?
So let me clarify. So the ETOD work that the city is leading through the FTA grant is very much outside of the scope of Sound Transit's agency TOD project. So this is really community-led development in that broader area that Eric showed you. For the question you asked, I'm gonna pass you that way. TOD, how are you? I think they're not at the phase where they're doing that yet. TOD, when you select the partners to develop, what was the process?
I think I'm familiar a little bit with your like the federal wave. I don't know if it's the same kind of process, so I guess that's.
It's a similar process. I think I would like to punt and bring our TOD team back to have a conversation with you in the future. Because that would just be 150% of the way, if I try to dive into detail on that question.
I'm happy to speak just very briefly on BLE, because I would echo what Jason said. We have an excellent, presentation that summarizes TOD strategies in general. But we're approaching it as a sequential delivery. So the idea is that the station can be delivered independently from the development part. So hopefully that's a helpful.
You mean specifically for joint development?
For joint development, yeah. But in addition, there's adjacent development opportunities. So hopefully that helps address your question.
I'm gonna build off of that a little bit. I heard a new term that I circled and I underlined, remnant parcels.
Oh,
Love that.
no, sorry, economic.
So, no, I think I'm gonna lean into a slightly different version of it. I think a lot of us can recognize when there is a TOD opportunity and it's a nice block shaped thing that is very clearly a developer's gonna scoop it up and develop it. I think my level of concerns are over those slivers of land that are left behind and often are sort of, they're advertised as developable, but no developer will ever step foot into that land and build a building between a highway and a elevated train line that nobody's going to put a building there. So remnant parcels was a great thing, a term for how are we going to treat these things that we are leaving behind. It will not be developed. What are we going to do with it? How do we not leave a scar on our community? I think that is a big thing I want to come back to. West Seattle has a number of them that we've identified a couple times. BLE has a number of them that we've circled already. We really do want to hear that. And we don't know who's in charge of it because it's a little bit between Sound Transit and a little bit between the city. But it's that area between the two that gets left behind, and then it's a scar on the community. I want to make sure that that's addressed somehow.
Okay, I can speak of city then.
We have an expert here, yeah.
So I can speak for Ballard. So I will say on Ballard, so between our urban design team and our TOD team, there's the joint development piece that Gavin spoke to, and then there's the adjacent development piece. And then we also do look at the question of, are there any remnant parcels or surplus parcels that are within our construction footprint that are not within our operation footprint? And so for that, we do look at between the TOD team and the urban design team that's integrated into the project team, we ask the question, are there parcels that would ultimately be appropriate for development, or are there parcels that would not be appropriate for development, so that we can find the appropriate uses for those parcels? So when we bring the Ballard project back with preliminary engineering, we could speak to how that's on Ballard.
Yeah. And for West Seattle, we're kind of step ahead, and we are going through the weeds on this topic right now, because we do recognize that in the past we've fallen short in this area, and so we're committed to not making some of those same mistakes in the future. And I think as part of the 30% review, diving into the ground plan and really that interface with the public realm is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought it up. It's a really, really important one.
I think it's one of the most positive things about seeing you guys together. Is previously the parties have said, oh, well, that's the other thing. And now you're together and it's not something that's going to get dropped. So really happy about that.
We did also write a letter about this about 7 years ago. So I'll pull that out. I don't know if it was anyone in the room.
Yeah, and just to add on, I mean, I think it's a great point, and I mean, back in the day, SDOT had, for example, had a tactile urbanism program. It was not huge. It didn't have a ton of funding, but it was designed for essentially small remnant pieces of right of way, which weren't used for mobility purposes, but could be used for placemaking purposes. So I think that's the kind of model that could work for something like this. I think to Brian's point, who's in charge, who's responsible for delivering is huge. Is it Sound Transit? Is it SDOT? Is it the city? Is it a private developer? I mean, that's obviously really important to clarify, but I think it's really good that this work is being done. And I think this commission, I think, would be very interested in hearing and seeing more, because it is really, at the end of the day, it becomes a really important part of making this work. So I agree. Great to hear about it. I think we'd like to hear more down the road.
Just wanted to make sure that a point of information. You mentioned that there is a new report that's about TOD opportunities.
Did I mention?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
So it just went to the executive committee this morning. It's all
Right.
online. It's, I believe it's the quarterly report. And
It's the regular quarterly report for the first quarter on
Absolutely.
TOD.
Yeah, and it discusses a lot of these topics. It discusses how they're integrating the project teams. Great graphics in there. I appreciate. So yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. Everything is public on the ST board website.
Okay. And yeah. And just one other question that is for you, Katie. There's you already kind of iterated, but I just want to make sure there's an understanding of the TOD opportunities, which are the city is working on both the question of TOD opportunities that are specifically could be ST, actually Sound Transit developed, and then how that's where the permit coordination and so many other things part of it. But you also stress that you're looking at a larger question of TOD in that mile, and maybe in some cases a little more than a mile or down along the BRT, potential BRT. So is that, and you explained to us kind of where that work is at, that you had a phase one of kind of community response, but they're two separate things. So I just want to make sure, is there an update on how it's going with the with Sound Transit in terms of the potential permit, simplification, clarification, streamlining, and whether there's another on the community one, I guess, beyond the phase two information, is there anything else that you could update?
Okay, so for the work we're doing to support Sound Transit's TOD development. So first there's there's the adjacent TOD. Sound Transit's done this many times. They're good at it. And I think where we're really focused on, right? So we're working right through all the co-planning to make sure we're optimizing those sites, thinking about where the access is going to come, making sure the station design works with all of that, thinking about, what is the zoning we need here to accommodate that? How much can we get on this site? So really working with them on some of the finer points and the schematics of how we can make that TOD work, both from our side of things, which is land use and zoning, right? And obviously they have their purview over sort of programming and how they do that and disposition. As for the joint development, this is sort of a new program, and I don't want to speak too much to it because it's on transit, but from the city side of it, this is, it's sort of a new thing. And so we're working through it together on how we do that sequential delivery from a permitting standpoint to make sure all those pieces fit together and we don't run into problems down the road. So SDCI has been a great partner in really coming to the table and working through, what are the issues going to be? What do we have to figure out how to address? What's on Sound Transit's plate? What's on the city's plate? And so we're going through that all right now. I think it's going well, right? It's going well. I think it's really exciting. Like, we're all really excited by this. It's a huge opportunity. So the city is very committed to try to figure out how to make that happen with them. In regards to the ETOD, so yes, so these are projects not within Sound Transit's purview. This is really about community-driven development. And so those three sort of pieces of that grant, those three different kind of buckets of work are all taking different parts of what that might look like in community. So again, you've got the ones that are very specific to the place. You've got the one that's sort of citywide, that there's going to be policy recommendations. We will weave those into the station area plans. And those hopefully provide us a pathway for implementing how we can do ETOD in these areas. So the tools, the strategies, the policies that come out of that will inform sort of those next steps coming out of the plans.
And Katie, did you say you already have identified a consultant to work with you all on developing that, or did I mishear?
On which part? So these are all different.
ETOD.
So the ETOD program is like the grant, and then each one of these has different consultants and different folks who we are engaging with to be parts of those groups. So all of them are underway right now, besides the Delridge Place-Based group. That one we're working on getting launched.
And Brian, you're next, but I just want to make sure if anyone has an NA and I'm bad on acronyms today, non-motorized access allowance and MAA. I want to make sure we get to that, but Brian, your question.
I think I wanted to ask a question on the BRT concept. I'm still trying to understand how the city is going to adapt to having train transit in some of these locations. Are we changing our bus routes to terminate at some of these things? Because I accept the fact that the transit times are reduced, but I also question the idea of somebody actually getting off of a bus that's heading downtown to then wait for a train to go downtown. And I think I'm wondering how are we changing our transit to drive traffic into the trains, or are we doing that or not? That kind of question.
So Metro is planning on truncating the line stations. So Rossdale, for example, I know we're on the C line stop at the station.
At Delridge.
And we're working with, so we're, no. West.
I got it.
Yeah, so we're working with Metro and the city, thinking about, okay, how does that circulation happen? Yeah, how all those things. So those are all new routing.
Yeah, understood. Okay. I think that's part of that part has not been necessarily clarified to us. We understand that there's a lot of bus traffic that are either arriving or waiting at these stations. I was always wondering why people were getting off the bus to do this when they potentially went downtown.
Same Delridge. The H line will not continue downtown, but will stop at Delridge. And Metro is also updating their launch plan right now.
Yeah.
So
it's multiple agencies all at the same time.
Maybe changing things. That's right.
Yeah. It's again, thank you all for being at one table. That's fantastic.
So any questions about the non-motorized access allowance and whether it's in Alaska Junction or Graham? Yeah.
I don't think it's a question as much as just excited to see what's being planned and more detail about that. And I'm really interested, especially at Graham, how it's linking into the existing infrastructure of bike. Not really a question.
All right, it's comment. All right, we moved into comments, but I don't know that we have time for everybody to comment, but I looked at Valerie and Phoebe on this one, but time for commenting? Are we? Oh, we got a comment. See, I guess it is.
I think
good job.
Yeah, I think it just allowed people to.
Good. All right.
Comment question. It's for the city team. So just noting that at some point in 2026, we'll be at 30% for WSLE. And I've asked this question before, but one thing that is wonderful with these long-going projects that are capital city projects is there's an opportunity for great collaborations with the Office of Arts and Culture. And so I just wanted to ask about, at what stage will there be potential outreach for that? I bring it up because on the early side, there's a great opportunity to maximize funds, to potentially have a planning artist be involved kind of from a broader scope, which is the scope you all are taking on these types of projects. So I just wanted to mention that and encourage that outreach and collaboration, especially as we're approaching 30% for some of this.
Yeah, I can speak that real quick. So aside from the planning artist fund, right, has to be tied to the 1%. So that's a thing I'll put that over here. But a lot of the stuff we did hear from the first round of engagement was very arts and culture focused. Delridge, which is, very proud of what they had arts and culture.
Can I pause for a second? There sometimes for having a planning artist, there is an opportunity that they can provide input
for design enhancements that can be separate from the percent for arts. So there's lots of ways that that crossover could occur.
Definitely, and I totally agree. I'm actually working on the Aurora project, we're working on getting them there, so very familiar with the process. But I think for this, the sort of approach we're going to probably be taking with arts and cultures, there was a lot of interest in more arts and cultural spaces. So not just a public arts approach, but really integrating into the economic development. And so as we're getting all of that feedback and getting into our development, we'll be working more with arts and culture just to sort of see how we can combine forces with them, look at the tools that they have and what we might be able to do to one, sort of enhance what's already happening in Delridge, and then two, bring in some of that to West Seattle, where we heard that there was a lack of artist space.
Cool. Excited to hear more about it.
Additional
I
comments?
think we've already mentioned it. We already mentioned it, but I think in future it would be great to hear more of how, going back to DET, how those engagements and those community comments are shaping the design and are affecting the broader conversation.
Yeah, okay. Any other final comments about the RET or anything else that top of mind?
I just have one quick comment about planning, and this is in anticipation of our PE reviews on Graham and our 30% reviews on West Seattle, that those PE and 30% reviews get into issues like station access, site planning, et cetera. So anything, and this is a plea for the city team first, but ultimately Sound Transit too, that anything that's coming out of stationary planning that helps affect those reviews, including street concept plans, that'll just be really helpful for us to get that overview early on. So I know you probably intend to do that, but that came up at the West Seattle PE. So looking forward to hearing more at that time. It'll really help us with our reviews when we get to that point. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think we have, as you know, we've kind of already detailed some of the reviews questions we have for WSLE, so we don't need to kind of revisit that. Not WSLE, but rather BLE. So I don't need to revisit that now, but because those updates and some of them are coming, and we kind of have a good sense of the schedule now. Knocking on wood for the fall 2026 EIS work, and just note that it has been an incredibly intense time for the people who are in this room, and then the past months or year almost at this point. So we really appreciate you coming in after major decisions have been made or indicated, and giving us a little more detail, a little more clarification on a lot of issues that we care about and will be involved with in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations on the first permits that were issued for West Seattle.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Any more to come?
Way to hold tight ships there. Yeah, or a little. That's never hard.
Good job.
It's a sunny day. People ready to go out and try and get the last days before FIFA, the last moments before the 2 weeks, if there is one.
And it's very small for a contest. So, yeah, there's like a